March 17th, Presidential Palace. 9:43 p.m. What happened in the next 60 seconds would change the course of history. A trained assassin, a head of state, and the split-second decision that turned prey into predator. What you're about to witness is the untold story of how President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso detected his own assassin before anyone else could. How did one man sense one entire security team missed? And what happened to the assassin caught in his own trap? The answer will leave you questioning everything you know about human intuition. Before we proceed, quickly tell us in the comments where you're watching this video from. We would like to know. Now, let's go into the details. If you think you know this story, think again. Before the chaos, before the headlines, it was just another Tuesday evening at the presidential residence, a date that would soon be etched into the nation's history. President Traoré had just concluded 14 hours of diplomatic negotiations, the kind of day that leaves even the strongest minds craving solitude. The president specifically requested to dine alone that evening, said he needed space to think about the mining proposal on his desk. What nobody knew was that someone else had been planning this evening for months, someone who had studied every detail of Traoré's routine. Everything appeared normal. Standard protocols, standard clearances, nothing that would raise any flags. But Traoré wasn't just any president. Before politics, he had spent 8 years in military intelligence. Before commanding a country, he had commanded elite units trained to detect the invisible. And that's why, when he entered his private dining chamber at exactly 8:17 p.m., something felt off. It wasn't anything he could name, nothing he could point to. Traoré always had what we call the sixth sense, the ability to feel danger before it materialized. It saved his unit more than once in the field. The water glass is placed slightly off-center. The window blinds adjusted 2 inches higher than usual. The barely perceptible scent of unfamiliar cologne. Most people would ignore these details. Most people would silence their instincts. But that night, those instincts would be the thread between life and death. What happened next would test everything Traoré had learned in his years of training, because somewhere in that very room, someone was watching, someone was waiting, and they were about to make their move. The human mind processes thousands of subtle signals every second. Most get filtered out, but for someone like Traoré, trained to notice the unnoticeable, the anomalies were beginning to surface. The president later told his aides he first noticed the air current in the room had changed. The ventilation system had been subtly altered. At precisely 8:22 p.m., something peculiar caught his attention. The reflection in the polished silver showed a shadow where no shadow should be. One thing about the president, he never shows what he's thinking. Even when he suspects danger, his face remains completely calm. It's what made him impossible to read during negotiations, and what would save his life that night. Then came the second sign. The vibration pattern was inconsistent with normal building movements. Someone was creating micro-disturbances from behind the eastern wall panel. Without alerting whoever was watching, Traoré activated the silent alarm. Not the standard protocol, but a specialized code known only to him and his head of security. The code received made no sense initially. It translated to "Falcon in the nest," no response. The security team had never drilled that scenario. It meant someone had infiltrated the inner security team. The third sign came when Traoré noticed the presidential seal on the wall was tilted precisely 1.7 degrees from its usual position. A casual observer would see a president simply stretching after a long day. But what Traoré was actually doing, he was repositioning himself out of the sniper's line of fire. Classic counter-assassination technique. Move without appearing to move. And then came the final confirmation. Traoré picked up the phone and spoke casually. "Yes, please bring the Ankara file. And tell Minister Diallo I'll call him back in 5 minutes." There was no Ankara file, and Minister Diallo had been in Dubai for 3 days. The message was clear. That's when the security team knew. The president wasn't imagining things. Someone was already inside the room with him. What Traoré did next would require perfect timing, because whoever was hidden in that dining room was seconds away from making their move. and they had no idea their target already knew exactly where they were hiding. 8:27 p.m. The presidential dining room. What happens in the next 40 seconds will be studied by security agencies worldwide for years to come. To the assassin, President Traoré appeared completely unaware, vulnerable. As Traoré's security team scrambled to decode his cryptic warning, the president was alone, face-to-face with what intelligence agencies would later confirm was one of the most lethal operatives in the hemisphere. What most people don't realize is that Traoré spent 3 years with special forces before politics. His response time was once clocked at 0.13 seconds, faster than most professional athletes. With this simple gesture, Traoré was creating a reflective surface, transforming an ordinary crystal glass into a surveillance tool. And that's when it happened. The assassin, later identified as Darius Merkova, a former Eastern Bloc operative, made his move. From concealment to action in under half a second. No normal person could have possibly reacted in time. But Traoré wasn't reaching for his napkin. It was textbook counteroffensive, creating the illusion of vulnerability while positioning for defense. What happened next occurred so quickly that even the high-speed security cameras captured only a blur of motion. The bullet meant for Traoré's heart missed by less than 2 inches, embedding itself in the presidential seal on the far wall. All monitors lit up simultaneously. By the time we registered what was happening, the president was already fighting for his life. What we're seeing here isn't just a trained response. This is survival instinct at its most primal. Most heads of state would freeze. Traoré countered. But even as his security team finally breached the dining room doors, they weren't prepared for what they found inside. They rushed in expecting to find the worst. Instead, they found the president standing over an unconscious assassin, calmly adjusting his tie. In the span of 12 seconds, President Ibrahim Traoré had not only detected the assassination attempt before it happened, he had reversed it. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. The difference between life and death often comes down to microseconds. But what happened in that dining room wasn't just luck. It was the culmination of a lifetime of training. What most people don't understand about Traoré is that before he was a politician, he was one of our most decorated field operatives. His specialty? Counter-assassination tactics. Long before he held political office, Traoré had developed what his instructors called preternatural awareness, the ability to process environmental changes that most human brains filter out. And as he held the assassin immobilized against the marble floor, those same instincts were screaming that this wasn't over. Look at his technique, textbook restraint posture, maintaining pressure on neural points while keeping himself protected from secondary attack. This isn't something you improvise. They know everything about you, your routines, your weaknesses. This is just the beginning. Who sent you? But Traoré knew something his security team didn't. The dining room had been compromised for weeks, which meant the moment he saw that mark, Traoré understood the magnitude of what he was dealing with. The obsidian cell doesn't send operatives unless they're certain of success. And that's when Traoré made a decision that would shock everyone in the room. When the security team entered, the president was doing something completely unexpected. Instead of backing away from the threat, he was methodically searching the assassin. Within seconds, he found what he was looking for. What he discovered was a next-generation communication device. Military-grade, the kind that maintains constant contact with handlers. Secure this, and check every member of the security detail who's been in this wing today. As the security team moved in to take control, something changed in the assassin's demeanor. He urgently whispers, "You're making a mistake. You can't protect yourself from what's coming. I'm not the one who made the mistake tonight." As the security team secured the perpetrator, they realized there was a secondary device in his clothing. Had the president not found the first transmitter, they would have missed it completely. What investigators would later discover sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. This wasn't just any assassin. The technology, the preparation, the access codes, this had state-level backing. Someone with immense resources wanted Traoré eliminated. But as the interrogation began, it became clear that the assassin's capture was just the beginning. Because while most world leaders would be rightfully terrified after such an encounter, President Traoré was already formulating his counterattack. Within 2 hours of the attempt on his life, Traoré had authorized Operation Midnight Veil, a classified counterintelligence initiative that would ultimately expose the faces behind the assassination plot. But first, he would have to survive the night, because according to the assassins' captured communications, a second team was already in position. 4 hours after the assassination attempt, the presidential compound remained in lockdown. But within the fortified walls of his private office, President Traoré wasn't hiding. He was hunting. "Mr. President, we've completed the preliminary interrogation. You need to see this immediately." What Traoré discovered in those pages would shake the foundation of his government. The assassination attempt wasn't just about eliminating Traoré. It was about destabilizing the entire region. The documents revealed a network that had infiltrated 4 levels of government, a shadow organization with tentacles reaching into the military, financial institutions, and even Traoré's personal security detail. What's remarkable is how quickly he processed the information. Most leaders would be traumatized, unable to function analytically after such an attempt. Traoré was already mapping the conspiracy within hours. The assassin was professional, trained to resist standard techniques. But he didn't anticipate what happened next. At 1:23 a.m., security forces intercepted a second operative attempting to access the compound's eastern gate. This second individual carried access codes that could only have come from someone on the inside, someone with clearance. And that's when the pieces began falling into place. I've never seen that look on his face before. It was the moment he realized exactly who had betrayed him. The conspiracy traced back to a minister, one of Traoré's oldest allies and the architect of the country's mineral rights reforms. The mineral deposits discovered 6 months earlier were valued at over $4.8 billion. Control those resources, control the country's future. By morning, as the first light broke over the capital, President Traoré had made his decision. Execute Operation Glass House. No exceptions. Within hours, 17 high-ranking officials were detained for questioning. Bank accounts were frozen. Communications networks secured. In an unprecedented move, President Traoré has revealed evidence of what he calls a transnational conspiracy to destabilize the government and seize control of newly discovered mineral deposits. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. When the people heard what had happened, how close they came to losing him, it united people. Suddenly, it wasn't about politics anymore. It was about their sovereignty. What impressed me most was his composure. He hadn't slept in 36 hours, had nearly been killed, uncovered a massive conspiracy, and yet he was completely focused on protecting the country, not himself. 3 days after the attempt on his life, Traoré did something that stunned even his closest advisors. He insisted on speaking with the assassin alone. Just the two of them. No recording devices. He was strongly advised against it, but he was adamant. What was said in that room remains unknown. But the aftermath was clear. Within weeks, arrests were made. Financial networks exposed. Shadow companies dismantled. The assassination attempt that was meant to destabilize a nation had instead united it. The conspiracy that was meant to seize power had only strengthened the resolve of a leader who refused to be intimidated. But for Ibrahim Traoré himself, the experience had left an indelible mark. He confided in an interviewer, "The attempt on my life wasn't the worst part. It was the realization that people I had trusted, broken bread with, could be willing to betray not just me, but an entire nation for profit." 1 year after the assassination attempt, Traoré's reforms have transformed the nation's security apparatus and economic structure. Foreign investment has doubled. Resource control has been nationalized. The assassin sent to end Ibrahim Traoré's life instead cemented his legacy. The conspiracy meant to destroy a country instead forged it stronger. And the man who trusted his instincts when everything seemed normal changed the course of history. 1 year after the assassination attempt that shocked a nation, President Ibrahim Traoré still insists on dining alone every Tuesday evening. Only now, the room has been completely redesigned. The walls reinforced. The security impenetrable, or so they believe. The protocols implemented after the attempt are revolutionary. Multiple verification systems, biometric scanning, AI-powered anomaly detection. But as recently declassified intelligence reports reveal, the original conspiracy wasn't completely dismantled. What we're seeing now suggests the assassination attempt was just phase one of a much larger operation. The key architects, they're still out there. New evidence points to a shadowy collective with connections in financial capitals across 3 continents. The president is well aware that the threat remains. But instead of retreating, he's chosen to become the hunter rather than the hunted. His unprecedented speech at last month's Global Security Summit sent shockwaves through diplomatic channels. Those who operate in shadows believe themselves invisible. But I assure you, there is no place dark enough to hide what we are now prepared to expose. Words that some dismissed as political theater, until 3 high-profile arrests were made the following day. The investigation has now expanded to 13 countries. Financial networks worth billions have been frozen. But the central question remains unanswered. Who is the mastermind known only as the architect? Mr. President, we've located the server. The data is being decrypted now. What President Traoré discovered in those encrypted files would shake international relations to their core. Evidence pointing to involvement from places no one had suspected. Prepare the statement. It's time the world knew the truth. But that is a story for another time. The assassination attempt on President Ibrahim Traoré revealed much more than a lone killer's plot. It exposed a global network still operating in the shadows. Our investigation continues, with exclusive access to classified documents and testimony from those at the heart of this unfolding story. What would you do if you discovered the people closest to you were part of a plot to end your life? How would you respond when your instincts are all that stand between you and death? So over to you. What would you have done in Traoré's position? Would you have trusted your instincts or dismissed them as paranoia? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay hooked to this channel.